Imagine you are a German general in the summer of 1942. Your communications are protected by the most sophisticated encryption system ever devised. The Enigma machine, a device of extraordinary mathematical complexity, encodes your messages in a cipher with 158 quintillion possible settings. 158 quintillion. Your cryptographers have assured you this code cannot be broken, not by any human mind, not in any reasonable time frame. Your messages are safe. Except they are not. In a Victorian mansion in the English countryside, 60 miles north of London, a team of mathematicians, linguists, chess champions, and crossword enthusiasts have been reading your messages. Every one of them. For 5 years, British intelligence knew German military plans before German field commanders received their orders. They knew the locations of U-boat wolf packs before the submarines reached their hunting grounds. They knew the date, time, and route of Rommel's supply convoys before the ships left port. And they never told anyone how they knew. This is the story of Bletchley Park, the hidden victory, the secret intelligence operation that shortened World War II by an estimated 2 to 4 years, and may have saved Western civilization itself. And almost nobody knew about it for 30 years. Background: the Enigma machine, 045 to 430. To understand the magnitude of what happened at Bletchley Park, you must first understand the Enigma. The Enigma machine was invented by German engineer Arthur Scherbius after World War I. Originally designed for commercial use, protecting business communications, it was adopted by the German military in the late 1920s and progressively enhanced throughout the 1930s. By 1939, the military Enigma was a masterpiece of electromechanical encryption. The device resembled a sophisticated typewriter. 3 to 5 rotors, each with 26 electrical contacts, sat in the machine's heart. A plug board on the front connected pairs of letters through electrical cables. A reflector at the end sent the electrical signal back through the rotors. When an operator pressed a key, the electrical signal passed through the plug board, through each rotor, reflected back, and illuminated a different letter on a lamp board. But here was the critical feature. Every time a key was pressed, at least one rotor advanced, like the odometer of a car. The next letter pressed went through a completely different electrical pathway. This meant that Enigma never encoded the same letter the same way twice in the same message. Press A at the beginning of a message, and it might encode as Q. Press A 2 letters later, and it might encode as T. The relationship between plain text and ciphertext was constantly changing. The number of possible configurations, rotor selections, rotor starting positions, plug board connections, was 158 quintillion. 158 trillion, 962 billion, 555 million, 217,000, 826,360. Even if you tested one configuration per second, working 24 hours a day, it would take 5 billion years to test them all. The Germans were right. No human team, working by hand, could break Enigma. What they didn't anticipate was that someone would build a machine. But before the machine, there was Poland. In the early 1930s, Polish military intelligence made a decision that would change history. They recruited mathematicians to work on the German cipher problem. Not linguists, not experienced cryptanalysts, but pure mathematicians. 3 young Polish mathematicians, Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Różycki, and Henryk Zygalski, became the first people in history to crack the Enigma. Using pure mathematics, group theory, permutation equations, Rejewski reconstructed the internal wiring of the Enigma's rotors from mathematical analysis alone, without ever seeing the actual machine. By 1938, the Poles were reading significant portions of German Enigma traffic. Then Germany added complexity to the machine. 2 additional rotors, more plugboard connections. The Polish system broke down. In July 1939, 6 weeks before Germany invaded Poland, Polish intelligence made a decision of extraordinary generosity. They shared everything they knew with Britain and France. Every mathematical discovery, every technical detail, the design of their code-breaking machine, the Bomba. The Poles knew they were about to be invaded. They knew they might not survive as a nation. They gave away their greatest intelligence secret so that someone else might use it to defeat the enemy they could not stop. It was one of the most consequential acts of intellectual generosity in human history. Bletchley Park, the secret factory. Bletchley Park, 55 acres of Victorian Gothic mansion and wartime huts in Buckinghamshire, England. In August 1939, a group of academics arrived at the estate under cover of a shooting party. They were, in fact, the core of Britain's government code and cipher school, the most capable codebreakers Britain could assemble. Within weeks of war being declared, they were at work. The challenge they faced was almost incomprehensible. The Poles had broken an earlier, simpler version of Enigma, the wartime military Enigma, with additional rotors, daily change settings, and multiple operator procedures, was vastly more complex. Enter Alan Turing. Turing was 27 years old when he arrived at Bletchley. He was already, by any measure, one of the most extraordinary mathematical minds of the 20th century. His 1936 paper on computable numbers had laid the theoretical foundation for modern computing, the concept of a universal machine that could perform any mathematical calculation. Now he applied that mind to Enigma. Turing understood something that human codebreakers had not fully grasped. The only way to defeat a machine was with a machine. Building on the Polish Bomba design and adding crucial innovations of his own, particularly the concept of cribs, known plaintext that appeared in German messages, Turing designed the British bomb. The bomb was a copper-colored cabinet roughly 6 feet tall and 7 feet wide, containing 108 replica Enigma scramblers arranged in rotating drums. It worked by testing hypothetical Enigma settings at machine speed, eliminating incorrect configurations through logical contradiction rather than testing every possibility. Instead of testing 158 quintillion configurations sequentially, the bomb could narrow the search space dramatically using cribs, predictable phrases that German operators used habitually. German weather reports always began with Wetter, the German word for weather. Messages to certain units always began with standardized greetings. Operators who were lazy or under pressure used predictable starting positions. These human habits, these small failures of operational security, became the mathematical keys that unlocked the machine. By mid-1940, the first bomb was operational. By the end of the war, over 200 bombs were running at Bletchley and outstations, processing thousands of intercepts daily. Bletchley Park became a factory, a secret, impossibly strange factory where chess grandmasters worked alongside debutantes, where eccentric geniuses argued about mathematical theory between 12-hour shifts, where the tea was terrible and the work was saving the world. At its peak, nearly 10,000 people worked at Bletchley Park and its associated stations. Almost none of them told anyone what they did there. Not their families, not their friends, not the veterans they met after the war who didn't know why the intelligence had been so perfect. They kept the secret for 30 years. Ultra: How the Intelligence Shaped the War. The intelligence derived from broken Enigma traffic was codenamed Ultra, and its impact on the war was so profound that historians have spent decades arguing about its true scope. What is beyond dispute, Ultra changed every major theater of the war. In the Battle of the Atlantic, the brutal campaign for control of the sea lanes connecting Britain to America, German U-boats had been devastating Allied shipping. Wolf packs, directed by radio from Admiral Donitz's headquarters, coordinated attacks that were sinking ships faster than they could be built. Ultra broke the U-boat Enigma. Suddenly, convoy routes could be changed to avoid wolf-pack positions. U-boats could be hunted by aircraft and warships directed precisely to their locations. The kill ratio inverted. U-boats that had been hunters became prey. Between May 1943 and the end of the war, Germany lost over 780 submarines. The Battle of the Atlantic turned decisively. In North Africa, Ultra read Field Marshal Rommel's communications with Berlin almost in real time. Supply convoys sailing from Italy to North Africa were intercepted because their routes, cargoes, and sailing times were known in advance. Rommel, the Desert Fox, arguably Germany's most brilliant field commander, was being defeated not by superior generalship, but by an intelligence advantage he never suspected. He wrote in his diary near the end of the African campaign that he felt as if the British could see his entire hand of cards. He was right. They could. In the Mediterranean, ultra-intelligence enabled the Royal Navy and Royal Air Force to decimate Italian and German supply shipping with devastating precision. Targets that should have been hard to find were found immediately. Convoys that should have slipped through in darkness were intercepted. And at the strategic level, Ultra gave Allied commanders insight into German order of battle, unit locations, fuel states, and morale that no previous generation of military commanders had ever possessed. Churchill received his Ultra briefings in a special buff-colored box, hand-delivered by MI6 officers. He called it "my golden eggs," the intelligence that other nations would have given anything to possess. But Ultra's greatest achievement, its single most consequential contribution to Allied victory, was yet to come. It would come on the beaches of Normandy. Operation Fortitude, the greatest deception. By 1944, the Allies were planning the most complex amphibious operation in military history. D-Day, the invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe through the beaches of Normandy, required not just military power, but something rarer and more valuable: surprise. Hitler had over 50 divisions in France. If even half of them were at the Normandy beaches when the Allied troops arrived, the invasion could fail. The casualties would be catastrophic. The war could be lost. The Allies needed the Germans to look in the wrong direction. Enter Operation Fortitude. Fortitude was a strategic deception operation of staggering ambition. Its goal: convince Hitler and the German High Command that the main Allied invasion would come not at Normandy, but at the Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel, 200 miles to the northeast. To sell this deception, the Allies created an entire phantom army. The First United States Army Group, FUSAG, existed entirely on paper. But it had a headquarters. It had radio traffic. It had officers writing reports and sending messages. It had order of battle documents that reached German intelligence through channels the Germans trusted completely. It had a commander, General George S. Patton, the American general the Germans feared most, photographed inspecting troops that didn't exist, lending credibility to a force that existed only in signals traffic and imagination. And it had a secret weapon, the double-cross system. Every German spy who had been sent to Britain during the war had been captured. Every single one. Some had been turned, persuaded or coerced to work as double agents, sending false intelligence back to German intelligence services. These double agents, controlled by British MI5, became the channels through which the Fortitude deception was fed to Berlin. The most important was a Spaniard named Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Garbo by the British, Alaric by the Germans. Garbo was running an entire network of sub-agents that existed only in his imagination, fictional characters whose reports he wrote himself, describing military movements and preparations that confirmed the Pas de Calais deception. The Germans paid him. They gave him the Iron Cross for his intelligence work. They had no idea he was working for the British. Ultra was critical to Fortitude's success. By reading German intelligence assessments of Allied intentions, British planners could see exactly what the Germans believed and adjust their deception operations to reinforce those beliefs. It was a feedback loop of extraordinary sophistication. Read the enemy's assessment, adjust the deception. Read the new assessment, adjust again. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, the Allies landed at Normandy. The Germans had 58 divisions in France. Only a fraction were at Normandy. Hitler, convinced the Normandy landings were a feint, a diversion to draw reserves away from the real landing at Pas de Calais, held his panzer reserves back for 6 critical weeks. 6 weeks during which the Allies consolidated their beachhead, built up supplies, and broke out of Normandy. When Hitler finally released his panzer reserves, it was too late. The deception had worked, and Ultra had made it possible. Historians estimate that Fortitude alone may have saved 10,000 Allied lives on D-Day. Some estimates go higher. There is no way to know, because the men who made it possible never talked about it. The human cost, Turing's tragedy. The reaccount of Bletchley Park is complete without confronting the tragedy of Alan Turing. Turing had done more to win the war than almost any single individual. His mathematical genius, his engineering innovation, his relentless intellectual energy. They had broken Enigma, designed the bomb, and provided the intelligence foundation on which Allied victory was built. After the war, he continued his groundbreaking work, developing some of the world's first programmable computers, writing the foundational papers of artificial intelligence theory, contributing to mathematics in ways that continue to influence computing today. In 1952, he was arrested. The charge, gross indecency. Turing was gay. In Britain in 1952, homosexuality was a criminal offense. He was convicted. Given a choice between prison and chemical castration, a course of hormonal treatment designed to eliminate sexual drive, he chose the treatment. The coroner's inquest ruled it suicide. A half-eaten apple beside his bed, believed to have been laced with cyanide. The man who had arguably done more than anyone else to save Britain from Nazi Germany, to save the civilization that convicted him, was destroyed by that same civilization for who he was. His work was classified, his contribution unknown. The award of an OBE, given in secret and never publicly explained, was his only official recognition. For decades, Alan Turing was almost invisible in the historical record. The injustice was immense. The loss of what he might have contributed to mathematics and computing is incalculable. In 2013, Queen Elizabeth II granted Turing a royal pardon. In 2021, his face appeared on the British £50 note. These were gestures, important ones, but gestures nonetheless. The man who saved the Western world died alone, prosecuted by the country he had saved, for nothing more than being himself. History owes him a debt that can never fully be repaid. When the war ended in 1945, the Bletchley Park operation was dismantled. The bomb machines were destroyed. Documents were shredded or sealed in classified archives. The thousands of men and women who had worked there were reminded of their secrecy obligations and sent home. And that was it. For 30 years, one of the most consequential intelligence operations in human history simply didn't exist. In any public record, in any history book, in any veteran's account. Generals wrote their memoirs and gave credit to battlefield intelligence without explaining its source. Historians puzzled over why Allied commanders seemed to know things they couldn't possibly know. Veterans of the war, from all nations, knew that something had been different about Allied intelligence, but couldn't explain what. The secret held. In 1974, historian Frederick Winterbotham published The Ultra Secret, the first public account of the Bletchley Park program. The reaction was extraordinary. Veterans who had served in positions that gave them access to ultra-intelligence, who had spent 30 years unable to explain their wartime decisions to family, friends, and historians, finally spoke. Military historians had to fundamentally rewrite their understanding of the war's major campaigns. The hidden victory became visible. But many of its architects were gone. Marian Rejewski, the Polish mathematician who first broke Enigma, had spent the post-war years working as an accountant, unable to tell anyone what he had done. Gordon Welchman, Turing's collaborator, who had made crucial improvements to the bomb design, faced a bizarre post-war experience. When he wrote his own account of Bletchley in 1982, American intelligence agencies pressured him to suppress it, arguing that some methods were still in use. The secret had been so deep, kept so long, that some of it was still classified 40 years after the war. Today, Bletchley Park is a museum. The restored huts where history was made receive hundreds of thousands of visitors each year. Turing's bomb has been reconstructed. The mansion houses exhibitions explaining what happened there. And the world finally knows, partly, what was done in those huts by those extraordinary people in those desperate years. There is a particular kind of heroism that history struggles to honor. Not the heroism of the charge, not the heroism of the last stand or the single decisive battle. Not heroism that can be photographed, filmed, or described in dispatches. The heroism of the secret. The 10,000 men and women of Bletchley Park went to work every day in drab huts, doing work they could never describe, producing intelligence they could never claim credit for, saving lives they would never know they had saved. The Polish mathematicians who gave everything away so that others might fight, they spent decades in post-war obscurity, their fundamental contribution unknown. Alan Turing, who arguably did more to shorten the war than any single battlefield commander, died convicted of a crime that should never have existed. The veterans of the double-cross system who fed false intelligence to the Germans, who made D-Day possible without firing a shot, spent 30 years unable to tell anyone, even their own families, what they had actually done in the war. They accepted this. They understood why it was necessary. They kept the faith. And in keeping it, they demonstrated something profound about the nature of courage. That it doesn't always wear a uniform or carry a weapon. That it doesn't always announce itself with drums and flags. Sometimes courage looks like a mathematician at a desk at 3 a.m, working on an equation that nobody outside this room will ever know about. Sometimes it looks like a woman moving a marker across a map, knowing that her work is guiding aircraft she will never see. Sometimes it looks like a man who won the war and then died for who he was, and never once was given the credit he deserved. The visible victory of World War II, the beaches, the battles, the flags raised over conquered capitals, those belong to history. The hidden victory, the intelligence war, the broken codes, the phantom armies, the double agents, that belongs to the people who never talked about it. They saved Europe, and they never said a word. Subscribe for more hidden history documentaries.